The transmission came through every channel at once. Ambassador Helena Cross stood before the gathered alien lords in the grand hall of the Voldori Supremacy. Her white diplomatic robes were clean and pressed. Her hands were folded in front of her body. Her voice did not shake when she spoke the words that would echo across 1,000 worlds. On behalf of the United Earth Government, I hereby offer our complete and unconditional surrender to the Voldori Supremacy. The potentate Zorvakan leaned forward on his throne of polished bone. His 4 eyes narrowed with pleasure. His massive form, covered in scales of deep purple, shifted as he savored the moment. For 300 years, his people had conquered species after species. The humans have been the most stubborn. They have fought in ways no other species had ever fought. They had won battles that should have been impossible. They had made the Voldori bleed for every planet, every moon, every asteroid. And now they had broken. The potentate smiled. It was a terrible thing to witness. His mouth stretched wide, revealing rows of teeth designed for tearing flesh from bone. His advisors made sounds of celebration around him. The military commanders in attendance lifted their fists in triumph. The humans surrender, Zorvakan announced to the hall. After 3 centuries of resistance, they finally understand their place in the galaxy. They will serve the supremacy. They will bow before our might. Helena Cross remained still. Her expression did not change. She simply watched as the alien lords celebrated their victory. What they did not know was that Ambassador Cross had volunteered for this mission. She had fought for this assignment against dozens of other candidates. She had trained for months to deliver those words without giving away the truth. The truth was simple. The United Earth Government had surrendered. The diplomatic corps had surrendered. The civilian administration had surrendered. But nobody had told the Imperial fleet. 300 light years away, Admiral Marcus Stone stood on the bridge of the U-East Defiance. Around him, the largest human fleet ever assembled waited in the darkness between stars. 12,000 warships, 3 million soldiers, weapons that had never been tested in battle, technologies that had been developed in secret for over a century. The message from Earth reached him at the same moment it reached the Voldori. He listened to Ambassador Cross speak the words of surrender. He watched the potentate smile. Then he turned to his communications officer. "Send the signal," he said. The officer hesitated for just a moment. What they were about to do would change everything. It would either save humanity or doom them all. There would be no going back. "Signal sent, Admiral." Across the fleet, every ship received the same message. 3 words that carried the weight of human history. Operation Prometheus begins. The Voldori had made a critical mistake. They had assumed that human government worked the way theirs did. In the Supremacy, when the potentate gave an order, every citizen obeyed without question. The military existed to serve the state. The idea that an army might refuse to surrender was impossible for them to understand. But humans were different. They had always been different. The Imperial fleet had been built in secret over the course of 200 years. It existed outside the normal chain of command. Its officers had sworn oaths not to the government but to humanity itself. When the politicians decided to surrender, the admirals had simply refused to accept the order. Admiral Stone had known this day would come. He had prepared for it his entire life. His father had been a fleet officer. His grandfather had been one of the original founders. For 3 generations, his family had carried the secret. For 3 generations, they had waited. Now the waiting was over. The Voldori home system was protected by the largest defensive network in the galaxy. Thousands of weapon platforms, hundreds of capital ships, an orbital shield that could withstand bombardment for months. They believed it was impossible to attack. But the humans had not spent 200 years building ships alone. They had also been studying, learning, developing technologies that the Voldori could not even imagine. The first phase of the attack was invisible. Quantum disruptors, hidden in asteroids that had been placed decades ago, activated simultaneously. The Voldori communications network went dark. For the first time in 1,000 years, the supremacy was blind. The second phase was fast. Jump drives that the Voldori did not know existed tore holes in space. Human ships appeared inside the defensive perimeter, bypassing the orbital shield entirely. The Voldori fleet scrambled to respond, but they were not prepared for enemies that could appear anywhere at any time. The third phase was brutal. Admiral Stone watched as his ships engaged the enemy. Human weapons proved more powerful than anyone had expected. Voldori cruisers broke apart under concentrated fire. Their famous armor, which had shrugged off attacks from 100 different species, could not withstand the new plasma cannons that human scientists had developed, but the battle was not easy. The Voldori were ancient warriors. They had conquered half the galaxy for a reason. They fought back with terrible fury. Human ships died by the dozens. Soldiers perished by the thousands. On the bridge of the Defiance, alarms screamed warnings. Enemy fire struck the hull. Systems failed. Officers shouted reports of damage and casualties. Admiral Stone stood firm. He had known there would be a cost. He had accepted it long ago. "All ships, continue the attack," he ordered. "We end this today." In the Grand Hall of the Supremacy, chaos erupted. Reports flooded in of the attack on the home system. The potentate rose from his throne, his scales flushing dark with rage. He turned to Ambassador Cross with murder in his 4 eyes. "You tricked us," he snarled. "Your surrender was a lie." Alana Cross finally allowed herself to smile. It was small and cold. "I told you the truth," she said. "The government surrendered. I never said anything about the fleet." Zvervakin raised his arm to strike her down. But before he could move, the ceiling exploded inward. Human Marines in powered armor dropped into the hall. Their weapons were already firing. Voldori guards fell before they could even reach for their own guns. The extraction team surrounded Ambassador Cross in seconds. A young sergeant handed her a rifle. She accepted it without hesitation. "Ma'am, our shuttle is waiting." Helena nodded. She looked at the potentate one last time. He stood frozen, unable to process what was happening. His empire was crumbling around him, and he still could not understand how. "You made a mistake," she told him. "You thought you were conquering a species, but you were only fighting a government. Humans are not the same as our governments. We are capable of thinking for ourselves, of making our own choices, of refusing to accept defeat, even when our leaders tell us to." She turned and walked out of the hall with her escort. Behind her, the sound of battle echoed through the corridors of the palace. The war lasted 3 more days. Human forces swept through the Voldori home system with devastating efficiency. The defensive fleet was destroyed within the first 12 hours. The orbital platforms fell one by one. Ground forces landed on the home world itself, engaging Voldori soldiers in brutal close combat. Admiral Stone directed the battle from the Defiance. He had lost over 2,000 ships. Nearly 500,000 humans had died. But the Voldori had lost far more. Their navy was shattered. Their infrastructure was burning. Their leadership was dead or captured. On the 4th day, the remaining Voldori commanders requested terms. Admiral Stone granted them nothing. He demanded complete and unconditional surrender. He demanded the dissolution of the supremacy. He demanded freedom for every species they had enslaved. The Voldori had no choice but to accept. When it was over, Admiral Stone addressed humanity. His message was broadcast to every human world, every colony, every ship in the fleet. "We were told to surrender," he said. "We were told the resistance was hopeless. We were told that we had no choice but to bow before our conquerors. But we chose differently. We chose to fight. We chose to sacrifice. We chose to be free." He paused. Behind him, through the bridge windows, the burning wreckage of the Voldori fleet drifted through space. Let this be a lesson to every species in the galaxy. Humans do not surrender. Not truly. You may defeat our armies. You may destroy our worlds. You may force our leaders to speak words of submission, but you will never break our spirit. You will never crush our will. And if you try, you will face the consequences. Across the galaxy, other species watched the broadcasts. They saw what humanity had done. They saw what humanity was capable of. Some felt fear. Some felt hope. All of them understood that the balance of power had shifted forever. Ambassador Helena Cross returned to Earth as a hero. She had played her part perfectly. Her surrender had been genuine enough to convince the Voldori. It had given the fleet the time and positioning they needed. Without her, the attack might have failed. She was offered medals and honors. She refused them all. Instead, she asked for a new assignment. There were still species suffering under Voldori occupation. There were still worlds that needed liberation. There was still work to be done. Admiral Stone remained in command of the Imperial fleet, but the fleet was no longer secret. It was now the primary military force of the new Human Federation. The old government had been dissolved. The politicians who had ordered the surrender had been removed from power. A new era had begun. The potentate Zorvakan survived the war. He was captured during the fall of the palace and held as a prisoner. He spent the rest of his long life in a comfortable cell, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong. He never figured it out. The concept of individuals acting against their own government was simply beyond his comprehension. In his mind, a surrender was absolute. When the leader spoke, the followers obeyed. He had smiled when humanity surrendered. He had believed his victory was complete. He never smiled again. The galaxy learned an important truth from the war. Humanity was dangerous, not because of their weapons or their technology. They were dangerous because they could not be predicted. They did not follow rules that other species understood. They were capable of acting against their own apparent interests, of sacrificing themselves for abstract ideas, of refusing to accept outcomes that seemed inevitable. Other empires took note. Other conquerors reconsidered their plans. The message was clear. You might force humanity to kneel, but the moment you turned your back, they would rise up and destroy everything you had built. That was the nature of humans. That was why they would never truly be defeated. And that was why, across the galaxy, species began to whisper a new phrase. It started among the recently freed slaves of the Voldori. It spread to trading posts as space stations. It was carved into monuments and written into songs. The phrase was simple. 3 words that captured everything. Humans do not surrender.